Hi everyone, the partial prophet here. Thanks for tuning in. So I wanted to remind you that we know in part and we prophesy in part, and then when Jesus comes, we will see fully. So today I wanted to talk about the Book of Esther. Wear a mask. Okay, so right now the Jewish people are celebrating the holiday of Shavuot, and actually the book that they read during Shavuot is the Book of Ruth. Um, but I don't really understand the prophetic shadows in that book. The book that I'm really kind of an expert at is Esther. Well, I'm not even really an expert at this book, but there's things in this book that um, um, I'm able to figure out some of the messianic or some of the prophetic shadows and the messianic shadows in the Book of Esther. I don't know, Ruth, for some reason when I read that, it just kind of goes right over my head. Haven't quite figured that one out. But today I wanted to talk about some of the things that I'm seeing in the Book of Esther and how it relates to what's happening in our country right now in America. So let me read. This is from Esther 2. Okay, so let me read this to you. So I didn't cover Esther 1, but basically the summary was one of the things that happened in there is Vashti did not come on the seventh day before the king as asked by the 7 eunuchs. Okay. So then in Esther 2, it says, Then let the young lady who pleases the king be queen in place of Vashti. And the matter pleased the king, and he did accordingly. Now there was at the citadel in Susa a Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been taken into exile from Jerusalem with the captives who had been exiled with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had exiled. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had no father or mother. Now the young lady was beautiful of form and face, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So it came about when the command and decree of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered to the citadel of Susa into the custody of Haggai, that Esther was taken to the king's palace into the custody of Haggai, who was in charge of the women. Now the young lady pleased him and found favor with him, so he quickly provided her with her cosmetics and food, gave her 7 choice maids from the king's palace, and transferred her and her maids to the best place in the harem. Esther did not make known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had instructed her that she should not make them known. Every day Mordecai walked back and forth in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and how she fared. Now when the turn of each young lady came to go into King Ahasuerus after the end of her 12 months under the regulations for the women, for the days of their beautification were completed as follows: 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with spices and the cosmetics for women. The young lady would go into the king in this way. Anything that she desired was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go in, and in the morning she would return to the second harem, to the custody of Shagaz, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the concubines. She would not again go into the king unless the king delighted in her, and she was summoned by name. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, came to go into the king, she did not request anything except what Haggai, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the women, advised. And Esther found favor in the eyes of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus to his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the women, and she found favor and kindness with him more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his princes and servants. He also made a holiday for the provinces and gave gifts according to the king's bounty. When the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not yet made known her kindred or her people, even as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther did what Mordecai told her, as she had done when under his care. In those days, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's officials from those who guarded the door, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. But the plot became known to Mordecai, and he told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. Now, when the plot was investigated and found to be so, they were both hanged on a gallows, and it was written in the Book of Chronicles in the king's presence. Okay, so back to the beginning here. So one of the things that I was thinking is, so when I read these chapters, I first kind of got an overview of like the time between, from Obama to Trump, like kind of moving from there to there, and then kind of back to Obama again. But what's kind of interesting about prophecy, I mean, God's book of prophecy is so full that I think we see multiple fulfillments for the same scriptures. So I'm actually going to show you that in this video, because first we'll kind of cover like the overview, and then we'll talk about something more specifically that relates to what's happening, like, in this very day, in this country. And so, take a look and see what you think, to see if things match up. Okay, so like I said, Vashti, in chapter 1, Vashti did not come on the 7th day before the king as asked by the 7 eunuchs. Okay, so what I think is the 7 eunuchs would be the 7 churches, okay? And so what you have is like during the time of Obama, the churches kind of lost their power, okay? And like, so being a eunuch would be like you couldn't pass on your seed, you couldn't multiply. And so that would be a picture of the churches not having power during the time of Obama. And then what's interesting is it talks about the 7th day, but I think there's like the time frame of Obama where God like allowed him to have power to do destruction in America. I think it was a 7-year time frame, because then what happened was then, and I think this always happens, is then Obama did something against Israel, and so then God like took away his power and started working on moving Trump into position to become the next president. And so when it says that Vashti did not come on the 7th day before the king, that was like, in the 7th year of Obama, or the end of Obama's time frame, he did something that was against Israel. And we did see that, this might have been in the 8th year, like right before Trump. I think this happened in December, right before Trump became president in January. That in the United Nations, they actually voted against Israel, and Obama abstained. And so we saw that happen, but there was probably some other stuff that happened before that we'll have to talk about some other day. And so then in Esther 2, okay, so then it says, let the young lady who pleases the king be queen in place of Vashti, and the matter pleased the king, and he did accordingly. Okay, so sometimes the king could be a picture of God. Okay, now, just so you know, America is a picture of, just if you're wondering why I think the queens are a picture of like Obama and Trump, it has to do with the Jewish people would be considered the man, the male figure, and then the Christians would be considered the female figures. And that has to do with the Jewish people are the southern kingdom, and the Christians are the northern kingdom. So anyways, that's what I think. I think a lot of times in scripture, men represent the Jewish people and women represent Christians. Because, I think it really has to do with the fact that because in the Messianic kingdom, the Jewish people are going to be the leaders, the teachers and the leaders. Okay, so then in Esther 2, so what we see is that since, God was unhappy with Obama, then he allowed Trump to become president. Okay. And then we read about this Jew whose name was Mordecai, who was in exile. And so that actually could be a picture of Netanyahu. Because during the time when Obama was president, I mean, you really saw like Netanyahu in exile. But then we see that like all of God's people are really were really in exile. So anyways, Mordecai could be a picture of Benjamin Netanyahu. And then it says he was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had no father or mother. Now the young lady was beautiful of form and face, and when her father and mother died, okay, so father would be a picture of Judaism and mother would be Christianity. Mordecai took her as their own daughter. So that could be a picture of like I mean, obviously Mordecai is a messianic figure, so that could be a picture of the Messiah, really kind of taking in, really kind of like the orphans and the the poor in spirit, and those are the people that Jesus is coming for, when he comes the second time. So it could be talking about that, or we could still be talking about like maybe more Netanyahu with Trump, maybe. Okay, so let's go on. So it came about when the command and decree of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered to the citadel of Susa into the custody of Haggai. Okay, so that could be a picture of Trump, where Esther was taken to the king's palace into the custody of Haggai, who was in charge of the women. Okay, so that could be a picture of Trump. And because we saw that Trump was, did some, good things, for the American Christians. So we're moving into that stage in these prophecies. Okay. So then it says, now the young lady pleased him and found favor with him, so he quickly provided her with her cosmetics and food, gave her 7 choice maids from the king's palace, and transferred her and her maids to the best place in the harem. Okay, so we saw that where Trump did things that were favorable for Christians and the churches. Okay. And then it said Esther did not make her people known. And then it said every day Mordecai walked back and forth in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and how she fared. So this actually could be both a picture of like Jesus being at the door, keeping an eye on what's going on with the Christians in America. It could also be a picture of Netanyahu. He was obviously keeping track of what was going on in America. Okay, and then it says, now when the turn of each young lady came to go into King Ahasuerus after the end of her 12 months, under the regulations for the women, and so what we have is 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with spices and cosmetics. Okay, that could be a picture of the 666. Okay, because like 6 months with oil of myrrh, so myrrh would be like a picture of suffering. That could be when Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, because it really caused suffering for the Jewish people in Israel. And then what's interesting is that like the other 6 months was considered spices and cosmetics, because the 2 announcements that Trump made were about the West Bank and the Golan Heights, were really like cosmetic things. They just had no meat behind them. So we see that like 666. But then it says the young lady would go into the king in this way, anything that she desired was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. So it's like we had 666, and then anyway, so then it says like the young lady oh, okay, so I highlighted harems because I think that could be a picture of more kind of like the people that don't follow God. And so what we could be seeing is that where Trump is, some of the stuff that he's doing with Israel really has some flavoring of Obama in it. And like some of the leftist views in it and stuff like that. So that could be what we're talking about here. And that God really gave Trump the freedom for a time, obviously, to, deal with Israel as he wanted until God brought judgment. And because we saw with the deal of the century that it was really more favorable for the Palestinians, maybe than the Jewish people, and it was really trading some of the land and stuff like that. So we saw that, and so then the scriptures go on and say in the evening she would go in, and in the morning she would return to the second harem. And so so what we had is like Trump going in however he desired. He came up with this deal of the century. Well, so then what happened was in the morning she would return to the second harem. We have to return to Obama's rule because of the deal of the century. Okay, because it says to the custody of Shagas, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the concubines. Okay, could definitely be a picture of Obama. And then she would not go into the king again unless the king delighted in her and she was summoned by name. Okay, so then it says, now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, came to go into the king, she did not request anything except what Haggai, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the women, advised. Okay, so that could be a picture of Trump going into, the king would be going into Israel. And then, because the Jewish people are the kings, Jesus is the King of Kings. And then it says so Esther could be a picture of Trump, and it said she did not request anything except what Haggai. So this place, maybe Haggai is a picture of Jared Kushner. Because Trump really did do what Jared Kushner recommended for the deal of the century and everything. And then it says Esther found favor in the eyes of all who saw her. So we did see that with Trump, that there was a bunch of people that really liked him, okay, and follow him and stuff like that. So then in here it says Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus to his royal palace in the 10th month. So actually in October, which is the 10th month, was when Trump removed the troops in Syria, and so Turkey was able to kind of move closer to Israel in Syria because of what Trump did. That I talk about that in a previous slide, previous video. And then it says the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she found favor and kindness with him more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. So this could be a picture of okay, so Mordecai making Trump queen instead of Obama. Okay, yeah, so this is kind of jumping back again where I talked about Vashti could be a picture of Obama. But it's funny, I wrote Mordecai in there, and I think I meant to write Netanyahu, because what this is where because, of all these things that Trump, supposedly did for Israel, Netanyahu actually really liked um, Trump a lot and definitely liked him more than Obama. Um, so that's, I think, could be a picture right there. And then it says, then, okay, so, we're up to the deal of the century now, and Netanyahu, like, is a big Trump fan, um, you know, like setting a royal crown on Trump's head. I mean, he gave him a city, Trump Heights, in Israel. Um, okay, so then what happens is then it says the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his princes and servants. And he made a holiday for the provinces and gave gifts according to the king's bounty. Okay, so here I think the king now is a picture of God, and the banquet is this coronavirus shutdown. Okay, um, and so like banquets could be a picture of, it talks a lot about drinking wine, and wine is a picture of the judgment of God. So we have Esther's banquet, and then it says when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Okay, so this could be a picture of that after the shutdown. So what happened was is that Trump started, opening up the country, or the states started opening up and stuff like that. And so what I think is that because God's people were more humble and feared, we had a healthy fear of the coronavirus. Okay, we understood, that we needed to be careful opening up the country. And so we continue to sit at, God's gate. We continue to stay in isolation. And sitting at the king's gate too, like Mordecai sitting at the king's gate, could be a picture of, being in a position of suffering too. Because like the party place would be more kind of like in the palace, so then, so it said Esther had not yet made known her kindred or her people. And so then I wrote Esther wore a mask. Okay, because that's what we see with Purim. The Jewish people, when they celebrate the holiday of Purim, they wear masks, for the holiday. And so it's interesting because I think these are prophetic shadows about the time that we're in right now. And so what we're seeing is that God's people, who are still basically under the radar, are just kind of living quiet, peaceful lives. They're the ones that are, wearing masks and following the rules and regulations that the governors are setting up and other authorities and stuff. Because look at what it says about Esther. Even as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther did what Mordecai told her, as she had done when under his care. Okay, so Mordecai is a picture of Jesus here. What we had is that Esther will follow Jesus and follow God's rules. What we're seeing is that she continued to do that even, without Jesus being around. She continued to follow God's rules. Okay, so what did I write? God's people, Esther, continue to follow God's commands and to respect your authorities, things that Jesus taught us. Okay. So when we were under, his care, when we were still, when the churches were, back when they had the power and were following Jesus, they followed God's rules. And so what we're seeing is there's kind of this hidden group of people that are still following God's commandments. Okay. Just like they learned from Jesus. Okay. And then it says, okay, and then in those days while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, okay, so there's two people that were sitting, that guarded the door, king's officials that guarded the door, and they got angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. Okay, so two things. The two people are the picture of the two witnesses. And so it could either be Trump and Netanyahu, but then it also could be a picture of the Benji and the Benny Gantz and Benjamin Netanyahu, um, um, because we see sort of the same thing with Benny Gantz too, that he's also um, participating in the same sins of Trump and Netanyahu with wanting to support the deal of the century and annexing the West Bank and stuff. So what we have is this Mordecai figure who's at the king's gate, who is going to expose Big Than and Teresh. So definitely could be a messianic figure here, where Jesus could show up and expose these guys, because it talks about the plot being investigated. So see what happens. Okay, so then I had a different. This would be my different take on it, and so I won't read the scriptures again. But this would be a little bit more like focused in a shorter time period. And so then it says, so it talks about Mordecai being in exile, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had exiled. So what we see is that Nebuchadnezzar here could be a picture of Trump. And so we see God's people in exile because of Trump's 666 and deal of the century. And so then it says he was bringing up Hadassah. Okay, so Mordecai was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had no father or mother. So actually this is kind of interesting, because when it talks about Hadassah, well, first I was thinking like maybe it could be a picture of, like Hadassah would be another name for Esther. So, okay, so it doesn't quite work, but what I'm saying is like Hadassah doesn't have father or mother. And so what we're seeing right now, because of being in exile, the churches and the synagogues were closed, okay? But then it says, now the young lady was beautiful of form and face, and when their father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. Okay, so what I wrote is that we see Trump trying to be the savior of the churches and the synagogues, okay? And so then it said, when it came about, when the command and decree of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered to the citadel of Susa into the custody of Haggai. Okay, so what we see, the citadel of Susa, I was thinking what we see is like Trump's people are filling the city square. So we saw, kind of people that followed Trump were out protesting. Okay, because it says when the command and decree of the king were heard, many young ladies were gathered to the citadel of Susa. So what we were seeing is when the governor said, okay, we're going to shut things down, to keep the coronavirus from spreading, then what we saw is that, some of Trump's people and other people on the far right were filling the city squares to protest. And then it says that Esther was taken to the king's palace into the custody of Haggai, who was in charge of the women. Okay, so that would be, the young ladies would be the Trump followers, and then Esther would be the American Christians. So then it says, now the young lady pleased him and found favor with him, so he quickly provided her with cosmetics and food. Okay, so what we saw was that Trump was quickly trying to get America / Babylon opened again, okay? And then, we saw that he, was trying to do some nice things for the evangelicals. And so he, so it says, he gave her 7 choice maids. Okay, that would be a picture of the 7 churches. So Trump opened the churches, from, the 7 choice maids from the king's palace that would be opening the churches. And then he transferred her and her maids to the best place in the harem. So that could be a picture of Trump causing the great falling away. So the harem would be Obama's people. So what we saw is that we saw people on the, Trump followers on the far right really kind of looking a lot like the protesters that we've seen before on the left. So, so the great falling away. Okay, and then it says, Esther did not make known her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had instructed her that she should not make them known. Okay, so Esther, God's people, continue to wear a mask and isolate. Okay, so you didn't know who they were. I mean, you can't tell who someone is when they wear a mask. And like I said, I think they live a more quiet lifestyle. They're not out protesting. And so then it said, every day Mordecai walked back and forth in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and how she fared. Could be a picture of Jesus, seeing how America was doing, but also could be a picture, or could be a picture of Netanyahu. Also could be a picture of Trump, the raven, because in Genesis it talks about the raven being sent out and the raven going back and forth. And so that actually could be a picture too of like, being neither hot or cold, just kind of bouncing around in your belief system. Okay, so then it says, now when the turn of each young lady came to go into King Ahasuerus after the end of her 12 months under the regulations for the women, for the days of their beautification were completed as follows: 6 months with the oil of myrrh, and 6 months with spices and the cosmetics for women. So what I have here is, what I've seen is, I think we had about like a 6-week time frame of the shutdown, because if you have myrrh being suffering, like I talked about before, so you have 6 weeks of the shutdown, and then it talks about 6 months with spices and cosmetics. Okay, so if you understand that spices and cosmetics are like luxury items, that could be a picture of the 6 weeks of partying and the country opening up, where people were kind of demanding, their luxury items. Okay. And so then it says, the young lady would go into the king in this way. Anything that she desired was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. Okay. So what we see is, like, what we saw is what I like to call the vultures. They were allowed to stock up. Okay, anything that they desired, they got all the toilet paper that they wanted. They got all the meat that they wanted. Okay, we see in the story about the Israelites about how God gave them all the meat that they wanted. And so then what it says, it was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. Okay, so what we have to be aware of is that Messiah is coming, and we don't want to be found drunk and with meat in our mouth. Okay, because that's what's going to happen, is that God said while they had the meat in they barely even chewed the meat, and then judgment came. Okay, with the Israelites. Okay, so we're going to see the repeat of that when Messiah comes. And then it says, in the evening she would go in, and in the morning she would return to the second harem. So what I think we could be seeing is, I talked about this before too. The second harem could be a picture of returning to Obama's rule. And then she would not go again into the king unless the king delighted in her, and she was summoned by name. Okay, so Esther talks about not being summoned for at least 30 days. Okay, like that could be a picture of the church not being summoned by God for 30 days. Okay, so then skipping to Esther 4, and I'm just going to do this really quick here. So we have Mordecai puts on sackcloth. That could be a picture of the coronavirus judgment due to the deal of the century. In every province, great mourning among the Jews. Okay, so it's interesting that it says every province. so what we could see is like God's people mourning. God put us in a time of mourning. It talked about the queen writhing. Okay, that could be a picture of the birth pangs. It said she sent garments to Mordecai to remove her sackcloth. That could be a picture of Trump trying to open the churches. And then it said, but he did not accept. So what that could either be like God's people don't accept the fact, like we're not in a big hurry to go back into the churches or the synagogues because we have a healthy fear of this coronavirus. Or it could also be a picture of, where Mordecai does not accept this sackcloth, could also be a picture of God not happy with Trump for opening things up so quickly. I mean, especially when you understand that God wanted to put us in a time of, like shutdown to help us turn back to Him. And so then, we have Trump kind of messing with that. And then it says Esther summons Hattak, which could be Trump, to go to Mordecai. And so that could be a picture of in the Belshazzar story in Daniel 5. So Belshazzar is a king that like is drinking wine. He took things out of the temple and was drinking wine out of the golden cups and things like that. And then that's the writing on the wall story. And so we have the queen comes in and tells Belshazzar about Daniel, and Daniel comes in and interprets the writing on the wall. So that could be a picture of Esther. Okay, so it could be a picture of the church telling Trump to go to Mordecai, where Mordecai would be a messianic figure, a picture of Jesus, to go, because she summons him to go find out what's going on. And so Hattak went out to Mordecai to the city square in front of the king's gate. Could be a picture of Trump, going to Jesus. And then Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact amount of money for the destruction of the Jews. So definitely we see that, we could see that with Jesus, where he's going to expose things and reveal things. But also while I was doing this, I realized it could have a second prophetic fulfillment, and that could be a picture of, these quote unquote Black Lives Matter protesters going on right now, and the vandals. That, if you were to go like, okay, because it says Esther summoned Hattak to go to Mordecai. Okay, so let's say Mordecai is the one, wearing sackcloth. That could be a picture of the protesters. And so Esther could be anyone, like Trump sending somebody to go talk to him to find out what they want. And then that's when they would like, reveal all that supposedly happened to them, and supposedly maybe money that was paid, and just talk about how things were set up for the destruction of the Black people. So we could see, that a possible fulfillment. And then it says, so Hattak went out to Mordecai to the city square in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact amount of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict which had been issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show Esther and inform her, and to order her to go into the king to employ his favor and to plead with him for her people. So we see that. I've, actually saw a guy on the news, saying that people should, participate. They think it's a very righteous thing to be protesting now, for Black Lives Matter. They think this is the righteous thing that people should be participating in. Oh, and I put that in quote, righteous, because, it's dubious that this is, especially the vandalism. This is just nutty. So, so what we see is that people are wanting, other Americans to participate. And to go into the king would be like a picture of trying to change the government, on their behalf or something like that. And then it says, so then Esther spoke to Hatak and ordered him to reply to Mordecai, all the king's servants and all the people of the king's provinces know that for any man or woman who comes to the king to the inner court, who is not summoned, he has but one law, that he be put to death, unless the king holds out to him the golden scepter, so that he may live. And I have not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days. They related Esther's words to Mordecai. Okay, so what we see is like Esther saying, so Esther could actually be a messianic figure right here. But also a picture of the churches, where what they're recognizing is, like Christians might be recognizing this, is that the reason why stuff is happening in this country is that we're not allowed to come to the inner court without being summoned by God. And so what we saw is that Trump went into the inner court twice. He did the deal of the century, and he tried to open the churches. Okay. And so if you do that, you're going to be put to death unless God holds out the golden scepter to you, which the golden scepter would be a picture of the Messiah. You need the Messiah to live. Okay. And so what we see is that, like, Esther has not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days. Okay, so what we have is Esther saying, I'm under judgment with the coronavirus, and I need the golden scepter. Okay. So definitely possible fulfillments. And then, let's see. Okay. So then it goes on to say, okay, so then the next verse would be, Mordecai told him to reply to Esther, do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this. Then Esther told him to reply to Mordecai, go assemble the Jews who were found in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens also will fast in the same way, and thus I will go into the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and did just as Esther has commanded him. So I thought it was kind of interesting, because this one phrase where it says, do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. I thought that was interesting, because we have this group of people that are starting to go back to church, and I've seen churches and congregations where they're not even wearing masks, or we're social distancing, and so I wanted to say, because some of these people have this false delusion that God's going to protect them, because they're Christian. They think God's on their side. Well, the question you need to be asking is, are you on God's side? Not, is God on your side? And then, because it says, do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. So what we have is like God saying, don't imagine that you're going to be able to escape, any more than any of the rest of his people. And it would definitely be like his words to people that think they are in God's camp when they really aren't. The sheep and the goats. Remember this with Jesus, when he separates the sheep and the goats, it was like the goats were kind of like, they thought what they were in, Jesus's camp, and they weren't. And then this, I couldn't really come up with a prophetic fulfillment for these verses, if you remain silent at this time, because I kind of think that, God is sort of wanting his people right now in America to remain silent, except, okay, so I had two possible fulfillments. One is that, instead of being silent, God wants us to repent, like in our prayers, I would say. Um, but the other thing would be you could apply this could be something that, some of the protesters are saying, like if you're silent, if you're not out protesting with us, you're going to perish, maybe you're in a position to take up our cause, you know. So that's a possibility. So, I thought it was interesting. It says, do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. In some places, we've had the protests going on for 3 days. In Minneapolis, it's been longer, I think. We're on the 5th night or something. Okay, so then, so some other verses. Let's see. I talked about this in my last video about the census, about everyone going to his own city. And then, but I thought, okay, so there was something in these verses that I wanted to bring up. It says she gave birth to her, okay, the days were completed to give birth. She gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. I think, okay, I'm going to skip forward because I think I meant to delete this. I mean, the only thing that I could think of is, with this slide, just the concept of a census, where I talked about God is the one doing a census, and, because what we see is sort of everyone kind of joining their own camp. We're seeing the wheat and the tares grow up to maturity and definitely revealing what camp they're in. And then, okay, so what I said here, while they were there, the days were completed for her to give birth. Okay, so that's the second coming of Christ, Messiah. And she gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. I think there's a connection with those verses to Daniel's 3 friends. They're wrapped in their clothes before they're thrown into the fiery furnace. So I definitely see a connection with that, with the fiery furnace. Okay. And then what we see is that, like, Daniel's friends are thrown into the midst of the fiery furnace, and in the midst is Jesus. Okay. And so, it says, like, because there was no room for them in the inn, what we're seeing is, like, God's people are really kind of getting pushed out of the cities and stuff like that. And then it goes on to say, in the same region, there were some shepherds staying out in the fields and keeping watch over their flocks by night. That could be a picture of the rioters, okay? And then this part I liked. It said, and an angel of the Lord suddenly stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terribly frightened. Because I would love it if Jesus came and dealt with these rioters, because another God-sized problem that we could use Jesus to come and fix. So what we see is that this concept of hiding for 3 months, because there's a connection with the Moses birth, to the Jesus's birth. And then when Moses was born, she had to hide him for 3 months. And then when she could hide him no longer, she got him a wicker basket. She put him in the ark. Okay. And so, so God's people have been hiding for 3 months, March, April, and May. And then what's going to happen is then, God's going to put us in the ark. Okay. um, of protection, because we need protection. Um, okay, so then, um, what we see in Daniel 5, I won't read these verses, in 6, is that we see the appointing of 120, which is the 144, a connection to the 144,000, and then a plan to appoint Daniel, which is a plan to appoint the Messiah, Jesus, followed by trying to find a ground of accusation. Um, so, okay, so, um, so what we had is that, okay, it says, we will not find any ground of accusation against this Daniel unless we find it against him with regard to the law of his God. So what we saw is that Trump broke God's law. He acted like God. He actually did it twice. He did it both in Israel and in America. The deal of the century in Israel, and then trying to open the churches in America. And so then, now, God's going to allow people to find grounds of accusation against him. Okay. So I talk about the three commissioners could connect to Benjamin, Benny, and then the third one would be the Messiah. And then in Daniel 9, we read about 70 years, or 70 weeks could connect to the 70 years. We have 7 weeks from January 28th to March 17th. That would be 7 weeks after the deal of the century was when the shutdown started. Okay. And then so then we had like 6 weeks of the shutdown. And then in Daniel 9, it talks about it will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. Okay, that has been happening. Okay. And then what we see is, so Daniel 9 says, okay, so listen to this verse. Daniel 9:26, it says, then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. Okay, so instead of Messiah, read anointed one will be cut off and have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, and its end will come with a flood. Even to the end there will be war. Desolations are determined. Okay, so what I was wondering is, okay, now are we in the midst of the second 6 weeks? Okay, so 62 weeks could be a picture of 2 time frames of 6 weeks. Okay, so then that would be April 26th to May 30th. Okay, which could mean that maybe we're on the edge of something happening. Okay, which I'm really hoping is the Messiah showing up soon. Okay, and then because one of the things that I didn't recognize before was that the 62 weeks connects to Belshazzar, like losing, it talks about him being killed, was slain, and then Darius the Mede receiving the kingdom at about the age of 62. So what we could be seeing is that we're shifting from, God's allowing this country to shift from, like Trump's gonna kind of start losing power, and then God's gonna allow Obama to have power again. Okay. Because, what you got to understand is that God is the one who appoints kings and, takes away the power of kings. Okay. So, anyways, but also Darius the Mede receiving the kingdom at about the age of 62 is definitely a picture of, like, the Medes and the Persians. The Persians could be a picture of the Christians, and the Medes are a picture of the Jewish people. So that's definitely a picture of Jesus too. I think we're going to see Jesus and Obama kind of come around the same time. So I wrote okay, so then what I wrote, like, the second 6 weeks could connect to, like, the 62 could connect to, okay, so what we had was May 22nd was 66 days after the start of the lockdown. And that was when Trump made his announcement about opening the churches. And so we see the woman in Leviticus 12 who's going to have a baby. like what we see is, okay, if she's going to have a female baby, which would be like a Gentile baby, um, which could be a picture of Trump, we see that she's unclean for 2 weeks and then she's separated for 66 days. And so that was why it was kind of interesting that May 22nd was 66 days after the start of the lockdown. But then we saw if the woman gives birth to a male child, which could be a picture of the Messiah, then she's separated for 33 days. And that ended like Friday, like yesterday, which is May 24th. Let's see what it was. May 29th. And then after the separation, then, okay, so here's what I think is happening is because then after the separation, then there's a sacrifice. Okay, then they bring a sacrifice. The woman brings a sacrifice to the temple. Okay, so what was happening is that after Trump's 66 days, then the woman would be bringing a sacrifice. And so then what we saw is so that like the sacrifice would be like the Passover lamb would be a picture of the sacrifice. And so on May 22nd, it was also the 14th day of Passover too. And so what I think is the sacrifice is the Passover lamb is God's people. Because when Trump cared more about opening the churches because for his reputation. It's not like he really cares about God's people. It's, he's really wanting to get back to the time when, the economy was good and everyone liked him and all that kind of stuff. That's his motivation. And so what he's doing is sacrificing the safety of God's people to try to look good. Okay. And, the thing is too that a lot of times Trump makes these announcements where he tries to do it near a holiday so he could really look like a messianic figure. And what was it? I'm trying to think. I don't know if he was trying to get the churches open before Pentecost or the fact that, this is the deal. It was Memorial Day weekend. And so he was trying to get the churches open on Memorial Day weekend. I guess the fact that he was born on Flag Day kind of went to his head, and so he was trying to get the churches open before Memorial Day weekend. Because remember early on he wanted to open the churches for Easter, that was very early, but fortunately that didn't happen. And then the other thing too that we saw on that day on May 22nd was Iran they had this huge diatribe about how this call to attack Israel. And so obviously that's the Passover lamb too, is the people in Israel. And then, so what's interesting is that May 26 was 120 days after the deal of the century. So that could connect to like the 62, because 120 can be parsed to six. Anyways, but I thought it was interesting that, 120 days. Well, we see the 120 day time frame also in the story of Genesis. And then look at the 26th date too. That could connect to 62. But the 120 days is found in Genesis, okay? Because this in the story of Noah, where God says He's only going to give him like 120 days because man is wicked. And so I think we could have seen a shifting on May 26th, because that was when the protests started in Minneapolis. And I don't know if you remember the time when Obama was president, we were seeing these protests kind of happen all the time in this country. And so really it's like we're seeing a return to the days of Obama, sadly. Um, and we see in Daniel 9:26 where it says, oh, it's interesting. I didn't even catch this before, that it's Daniel 9:26 could connect to May 26th. And so, it says after the 62 weeks, the anointed one will be cut off. So Trump would be the anointed one that got cut off and have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. So the people connected to Obama, because we're reading Revelation about the sixth king coming back to be the eighth king, or whatever that is. So that's where I think we are prophetically. And then, so obviously, we're hoping this means the Messiah is going to be born soon. And so I talked about this Genesis 35 in my last video, where, Rachel began to give birth and suffered severe labor. That's the coronavirus. And then it talks about, do not fear, now you have another son, would be a picture of, Israel with, I wrote, finally forms a government with two prime ministers. I mean, not really like two prime ministers, but with two Benjamins, I mean, right now, Netanyahu's the prime minister and Benny Gantz is the minister of defense or something like that. He has some other position. And then at some point, the deal is that at some point, like a year and a half from now or something, then Benny Gantz gets to be the prime minister. I don't know if they switch positions or what happens. And then, but I realized too, when I talked about these verses last time, I didn't really kind of catch that it came about as her soul was departing that she named him Ben-Oni. Because I'm really back to recognizing in these verses the concept of the two messiahs, okay, where we have the false messiah and then the second messiah. And so we see that like in the twin stories, a lot of twins when they're born kind of gives us the concept of the false messiah followed by the true messiah. And then also too, like the two banquets of Esther, the first one would connect to the false messiah, which would be Trump. And then the second banquet would be connected to the true Messiah. And the two visits to Joseph and the two dreams of Joseph and on and on and on. Okay. And so what we have is that it came about as her soul was departing. So what we see maybe right here in America is, we see the great departure, but we also could be seeing America dying. Okay. And and so then she named him Ben-Oni, the son of my sorrow. So Trump is the son of my sorrow, the false messiah on May 22nd. And so what we saw is on the 24th, okay, so Daniel, how Daniel, he's mourning for 21 days, and then he has an encounter with a messianic figure on the 24th. We see this concept of the two kind of messiahs hidden in that chapter. Like Daniel, the real story, he only sees Gabriel, but it's kind of like, if you read that, you could sort of see like maybe two encounters. And then we also see this concept of two 24s, because in, what is it? The Book of Haggai talks about like the second time on the 24th, God says something to the prophet. And, so we see this concept of like the second 24, okay, in there. And so I think what we've already seen the fulfillment of. This is why I'm looking for the Messiah really soon, because we've seen the first 24 fulfillment where we had Trump on the 22nd said, I'm opening the churches, and that happened on May 24th. Okay. And then, so what we see is Rachel weeping for her children, or Esther weeping for her people, because of the things that Trump did. Okay. And I'll talk about that Esther verses in the next slide. But then it goes on to say, but his father called him Benjamin, the son of my right hand. So kind of like we have two, first we have the son of my sorrow, followed by the son of my right hand, which would be a picture of the Messiah. So we're going to see Messiah born or return or whatever. And then the second 24, and so I wrote day 24 of the second Passover. I'm thinking that's tomorrow. I think I got that in another slide too. And then it says, Rachel died and was buried on the way to Bethlehem. Jacob set up a pillar over her grave. That is the pillar of Rachel's grave to this day. So kind of this concept of Babylon dying. Not a happy picture. So this is where I talk about the second banquet of Esther, is where we see Esther weeping for her people. Okay. So it says, okay. So in Esther 7, it says, now the king and Haman came to drink wine with Esther the queen. Okay. And the king said to Esther on the second day, see the emphasis of the second day. This is the second banquet. So this is what happens when Messiah comes. Also, as they drank their wine at the banquet, it says, what is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to half of the kingdom, it shall be done. Then Queen Esther replied, if I have found favor in your sight, O king, and it pleases the king, let my life be given me as my petition, and my people as my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, to be annihilated. Now, if we had only been sold as slaves, men and women, I would have remained silent, for this trouble would not be commensurate with the annoyance to the king. Then King Ahasuerus asked Queen Esther, who is he and where is he? Who would presume to do this? Esther said, a foe and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman became terrified before the king and queen. Okay. So the part I wanted to emphasize was, so we see Esther weeping for her people. And it's interesting because she said, if we had only been sold as slaves, she wouldn't be bothering the king. Okay. And so what I wrote is like, if Trump only tried to open the workplaces, we would have been fine with that. But now he's messing with God's people by trying to open the churches and the synagogues. Okay. And then I thought it was interesting too that she emphasizes men and women, because what we could be seeing is kind of this double fulfillment, where, or two reasons for Esther to be weeping for her people. And one, the women, where would be like the America, weeping for the Christians in America, and weeping for America. And then the men would be a picture of Israel, so like I said, I talked about Israel. I think we're going to see Israel get attacked. So that would be a second reason for Esther to weep for her people. And then actually I didn't even think about this till I was reading it, that the second banquet could also be a picture of, because it says the king said to Esther, that could be a picture of, the king would be a picture of God saying to Esther. Esther could be a picture of Obama here. Because then it's, it's like God saying to Obama, what is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to half of the kingdom, it shall be done. And, so this could be a picture of God, allowing Obama, to have half the kingdom, which would be America. So, because the first banquet, where they're drinking wine, is obviously like a picture of the coronavirus. And that's the only thing that happens in the first banquet. You only read about them drinking wine. Not much else happens. So okay. So your corrections 5780. I talked about the judgment of the firstborn, which was the last plague in Egypt, and so the coronavirus was the start of God's judgment on America. Like, basically, we saw a lot of older people in America dying from the coronavirus, and so that could be a picture of the firstborn. Like, I'm wondering if, like, a lot of the people that were dying from the coronavirus were like Christians, connected to God. Because I talked about the coronavirus being God purifying us and cleansing us. And because what we saw is out of all the nations, America had the most people died out of all the nations. And then we're seeing now like this spike in Brazil. And I had like heard about revival had been happening in Brazil like years ago. I don't know the exact time frame. And so it could be that a lot of the people in Brazil are really strong God followers. And so that's why we're seeing, people dying in Brazil. And and we read about like Jesus bringing, those who have died with him, when he comes, so it's not like God's trying to get rid of them. He's just, getting us ready for the Messiah, cleansing us, purifying us, and so then I was reading, because this is kind of interesting too. These are the verses. Numbers 8 is what the Jewish people read tomorrow, which is a very interesting passage for tomorrow. It talks about lighting the menorah, which I think definitely connects to the Messiah. And then it talks about separating the Levites, okay? And so what I saw in there is, it says, "Thus you shall separate the Levites from among the sons of Israel, and the Levites shall be mine. Then after that the Levites may go in to serve the tent of meeting, but you shall cleanse them and present them as a wave offering, for they are wholly given to me from among the sons of Israel. I have taken them for myself instead of every first issue of the womb, the firstborn of all the sons of Israel." So what we can kind of see in these verses is kind of this concept of like, up to this point, we have had the firstborn of Israel dying. And then what we're going to see is maybe a switch to the Levites, who would be the firstborn of all the sons of Israel, now being the ones that would be the offering, the wave offering. And so kind of this shift in the coronavirus, like I talked about, like the second part of the coronavirus judgment, because then after that, I think like the third part would be, then God's going to have his enemies, die from the coronavirus. So that's what I wanted to talk about on that slide. Okay. And then, okay, so when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies and recognize that her desolation is near, then those who in Judea must flee to the mountains, and those who are in the midst of the city must leave, and those who are in the country must not enter the city, because these are days of vengeance, so that all these things which are written will be fulfilled. But when you see these things begin to take place, straighten up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Okay, so really think we're so close to Jesus returning, because one of the things is, okay, so Jerusalem surrounded by armies. I talked about how Jerusalem could be a prophetic shadow of America, where Zion is Israel, and then Jerusalem is a prophetic shadow of America, surrounded by armies. Okay, surrounded by, the protesters could be a type of army. I mean, but that we do see the National Guard being called out to deal with the protesters, And then it's interesting that it says, um, those who are in the midst of the city must leave, okay? Because people in the city are leaving, okay? And those in the country aren't entering the cities, okay? Um, and then, um, okay, so, and those who are in Judea would be a connection to the Messiah, must flee to the mountains. Would be like flee to the seven churches or flee to, the mountains. Could also be a picture of the Messiah, the seven mountains, the seven, well, there's seven angels connected to the seven churches. Okay, so then we also see in Matthew 24, Matthew writes about the abomination of desolation. So it says, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which is spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. So it's kind of interesting because these are really similar passages. I mean, Matthew and Mark talk about the abomination of desolation. And so I told you about how I think, well, I don't know if I told you this, but I'm telling you now that I think maybe when Trump said he was going to open the churches and the synagogues, that could be like the abomination of desolation, because it says standing in the holy place. Okay, I mean, we've already seen Trump do that with the deal of the century, because the holy place that he was standing in was Israel at that point. But now we're seeing him, messing with the churches and the synagogues in America, acting like, he's the savior of the churches and the synagogues in America. So then God goes on to say in verse 20 of Matthew 24, pray that your flight will not be in the winter or on a Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation, such as not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, no ever will be. And then it says, okay, these are my favorite part of the verse. It says, unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved, but for the sake of the elect, those days would be cut short. And so what I'm hoping that means is that the riots and the coronavirus are going to be cut short, because God can see how, like right now, the fact that like people are running around now social distancing and not wearing masks, that's making it more dangerous with coronavirus in this country. And then the riots obviously are very dangerous. And so, I could see that God can be saying that we need to cut these days short, or, for the sake of his elect, he wants to save his elect, so he needs to cut these days short. And so, but what's really interesting, okay, so this was encouraging too. I read about the plague of flies, okay, in Exodus 8, okay. And it's, okay, so this says, for you, if you do not let my people go, okay, so picture God saying this to Trump, if you do not let my people go, stop be the Messiah, let him go. Behold, I will send swarms of flies on you and on your servants and on your people and into your houses, and the houses of the Egyptians will be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground on which they dwell. But on that day I will set apart the land of Goshen, where my people are living, so that no swarms of flies will be there, in order that you may know that I, the Lord, am in the midst of the land. I will put a division between my people and your people. Tomorrow this sign will occur. Then the Lord did so. And there came great swarms of flies into the house of Pharaoh and the houses of his servants, and the land was laid waste because of the swarms of flies in all the land of Egypt. Okay, so I highlighted the land was laid waste, because do we not see destruction? So the flies, I think, could be these protesters. And what's interesting too, it talks about the swarms of flies into the house of Pharaoh, because we do see protesters outside the White House too. But what I like about this is the most important part is that God says, like tomorrow this sign will occur, he's gonna put a division between his people and like Trump's people or whatever the other people. And so I like that. We're gonna, and I really think the Messiah is gonna do this. We see Jesus separating the sheep from the goats. You know, and so, if you understand that we need the Messiah to come and mark us, and put us in our Passover houses or booths or whatever with the protection of the blood of the lamb, while God brings judgment to the rest of the world. So okay, so talking about dates, I'm just gonna do this really fast because I'm really bad at this. But Solomon observed the feast at that time for 7 days. Could be a picture of the Feast of Booths, which was the lockdown. On the 8th day, they held the solemn assembly. So the state started opening up, but obviously it was solemn. And then it says for the dedication of the altar 7 days and the feast 7 days. So basically what we had was the shutdown would be like the dedication of the altar would be a time frame. Like a time frame of 7 days or until it was completed, and then followed by a feast for 7 days or till it was completed, which would be a picture of like the feasting, that the people that aren't God's followers are doing. Because then it says, then on the 23rd day of the 7th month, he sent the people to their tents, rejoicing and happy of heart. So I think that could be a picture of May 23rd, where Trump, after he made his announcement about the churches, he sent everyone to their tents happy. So on the 23rd, the Jewish people were able to go to the synagogues happy, even though I don't think a lot did, and the same thing with the churches. But then I think too with these verses that we could see a second fulfillment with Messiah. And I won't try to figure that out. We'll talk about that after Jesus comes. And then back to Esther again, so that, we talked about where Esther says, assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens also will fast in the same way, and thus I will go into the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and did just as Esther had commanded him. So what we could have a possible fulfillment is we could have the Jews fasting for Shavuot, May 28th to the 30th. And so, some of the stuff that I read is, this wasn't like a really happy Shavuot, because a lot of the Jewish people were going to stay in lockdown for Shavuot, and not really meet with other Jewish people and stuff like that. A lot of the Jewish people, they kind of made a mistake at the beginning of the coronavirus and left things open too long with the synagogues, and they learned from that, and now they're taking it more seriously. So just a more somber Shavuot. Then it's interesting that it says the maidens will fast in the same way, because what we have is the Christians have a similar holiday coming up, Pentecost. It's very similar. It's based on 50 days. Their 50 days is 50 days after Easter. But a lot of the origins, really come from Shavuot. And so that's happening on May 31st. And so then, so one thing I'm wondering, is Jesus going to come on the 31st? Because that would be the third day after, it'd be kind of like the third day of Pentecost. Full day anyway. But then, and also like a 50th day. But then I'm also wondering too, because I always am re-questioning all the time, is that, where we have the maidens are going to fast. What if it's 3 days? So maybe we'll see something happen like the third day after Pentecost. So Pentecost is the 31st, then June 1st and June 2nd. So what would be interesting about June 2nd is that it would be a week after the June 26th, which is the 120 days. So it would be 127th day. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Wait, let me count this again. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. Yeah, it'd be 127th day after the deal of the century. Or 1 week after the riots started. So that's a possible day, because we read about he makes a covenant with the many for 1 week and then puts a stop to sacrifice and grain offering in the middle of the week. So I don't know if that happens in the middle of Jesus's week when he is here, or he comes in like the middle of the week. I don't know. We'll see what happens. And then, but what's interesting definitely is the Jewish people read Numbers 8 tomorrow, which is where you read about lighting the menorah. Definitely a big connection to the Messiah, lighting the 7 lights, okay? Like the 7 lights of the 7 churches. So what's interesting is tomorrow, May 31st, is like the 23rd day, but then that evening is the 24th day. So that could be the second 24 that we're looking for. Anyways, but I definitely think Messiah is just right around the corner. So definitely hang in there. We've seen the fulfillment of a lot of things in scripture. Obviously as more and more scripture gets fulfilled, we, start finding more stuff happening. So remember, we're past the 2-year time frame. I was looking for, okay, let me find this. In my last video, I was looking for the Messiah last weekend, because we passed on the yeah, it's over here on the Jewish calendar. On the 23rd of May was the 2-year anniversary on the Hebrew calendar after May 14th. When Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. When we passed the 2-year time frame after Trump canceled the Iran deal. So we're past the 2-year time frame. So definitely, I'm definitely expecting stuff really soon. And then apparently we're past the 120 time frame that happened on Tuesday. So and I think we passed the 6 days that happened on the 22nd. The 29th on Friday was the 33rd day, or I could be a day or 2 off. It depends on I was counting the shutdown. It really depends on, or the opening, it really depends on when the official opening would be, so that could adjust by a day or 2, so definitely seen things getting fulfilled. And so I've talked about this before, where we have the sea of Obama on one side and the sea of Trump on the other side. And so I think what we've seen is kind of these people on the far right who are protesting against the shutdown. They're not wearing masks. Like, they would be like the ones storming was that in Michigan, where they stormed the governor's mansion with rifles? So just a bunch of crazy people on that side. And then we have the CEO of Obama. And so we're seeing like the same people that we saw during the time of Obama's presidency, the Black Lives Matter rioters. There's obviously other people in that camp. But we're seeing, like some of the same stuff that we saw during the time of Obama happening. And then, so what I have is, we want to be in the middle. Okay, so God's people would be the ones that are quiet. They follow the laws. They wear the masks. They're considerate of others. They respect authority. Because with the riots, it's just been crazy, because I mean, it was crazy because like CNN got arrested and the protesters, didn't get arrested. I mean, it's just such a upside down backwards world. And then just the things that people are saying about the rioters, like Trump got in trouble, for mentioning shooting or something. But if you have like an army of people causing destruction, you can't just, sit back and, I mean, you have to be serious. I mean, if they know they can get away with murder, they'll just do it. So, I mean, just a lot of what people are saying, they're really excusing the rioters and shaming the people that want to be serious about dealing with the rioters. And I just don't think that's good. Um, um, so, I mean, it was interesting with the protesters back when they were protesting the shutdown. It was like people that wanted to wear masks were being shamed. Um, uh, Even though they were complaining about the mask shamers. Uh, I mean, it was interesting. I heard more people. I didn't really see that. I heard more people that were shaming people that wanted to wear masks. So just it's a crazy time in the world. We can use a Messiah. So anyway, so I definitely think we want to be in the middle. We want to with Messiah in the middle. We want to be in the middle of the fiery furnace with the Messiah. We want to continue to be the humble people that follow God's laws. And the law of the land too. So I like what this says. As the sea splits, the hidden world came to light. So I definitely think, God's people were hidden right now. And then it says, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there's no longer any sea. Definitely be, quiet, peaceable, stay out of the cities, stay away from the protests, stay out of the churches. I really would. Just stay home. Because I think Messiah is going to be here any day now. And then, we don't, we can stay safe by watching our church services at home and reading our Bible and stuff. So I definitely think, God's people are the ones that are, willing to, take the coronavirus seriously and wear a mask. So that is my video. I thank you so much for tuning in. Definitely, obviously, when Jesus comes, we will know, we'll see him fully, when Jesus comes. So I, just hopefully, I know it's kind of a crazy time in the world right now, but be encouraged. Hopefully you see that that Jesus has to be at the door, and that we're going to see fulfillment. We're going to see him coming back like any day now. It's got to be any day now. I'm sorry, I'm not really good with the dates. I mean, I know more like after things happen. I was really expecting the Messiah to come, but, just didn't really see that it was the false Messiah with my last video, on the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. That was when, Trump did his thing. So I'm not really sure. I'm hoping maybe tomorrow, we'll just have to wait and see. So just be prepared, be humble, be in prayer, be fasting, be repenting. So look up, for your redemption draws nigh. Thanks so much for listening. God bless, and we'll catch you later.